Mers has distorted into a seaborn-like form, much like Elena, the blood-red knight, became a blood fiend. And so, unlike her, they need to deal with Mers. Sometime in the past, Mers was in her home. She heard that the news of the war was getting grimmer by the day. The sea terrors were coming, swarming. It was the day when the ocean-born calamity broke and sunk Aegir's seemingly infinite starward growth. A researcher asked if she was going to the surface. More people were getting too anxious to stay in Aegir. She's not. If Aegir falls, it would only mean that the surface would be soon to follow. She then asked if they'll head to the surface as well. They're thinking about it. Not many did, but people around her began to leave for the surface. They all tried to convince her to leave with them, but fleeing her home in favor of the land didn't feel right. The foretold calamity descended. While it dealt a heavy blow to Aegir, the surface suffered much worse. She had to help them. How could she not, after hearing that such a terrible thing has happened? Mers told someone that she'd head to the surface, and that someone was a researcher who asked if she was serious, to think hard about it before she went there. If she left now, coming back might no longer be an option. Every day must be a struggle for them. At least she doesn't have to fear for the immediate tomorrow. She saw it as her responsibility to provide help, as someone who was better off than them, even by a little. She knew, but if she didn't go there to help, things will only get much worse for the land dwellers. That researcher believed that the danger that they were facing was the very thing that will hurt her. She still wanted to help them. She procured an Aegirian research vessel at a cheap price to bring her to the land. It was unable to submerge while moving, so it wasn't the best ship out there. She normally wouldn't have given this a second look. It would help her navigate the coastal sea. She didn't expect this. The first thing she witnessed on the surface was the bottomless, hostile attitude against the Aegir, which was paranoia, xenophobia, and minorities being used as a scapegoat for problems that they had no clear answers for. They denied her offer of help, for the sole reason that she came from the sea. She was an Aegir. Denying her compassion and research, they told her to get lost. They don't need her research. They're from the same place as the calamity. Do they think they're so stupid that they trust her? No, you're stupid for believing that she's automatically a threat. They confiscated her catalysts and tore her research apart. The calamity has caused her to want to stand with them, which was also that which fuels their hatred. Clearly, she found herself in Iberia. If she was in a less xenophobic region or met a company that was more open-minded, she might have had more success. Any kindness, any compassion she gave them was repaid twofold in hatred and suspicion. She asked if the terrible conditions of that land transformed them into monsters, or was this always their nature? Well, crises either bring out the best in people or the worst. It didn't take long before her research vessel that she brought from Aegir was confiscated out of suspicion. A few weeks later, when she finally came across that vessel by the beach, there was an uncanny name inscribed on its side, Rebellion de las Masas. None of that was enough to stop her from continuing her research. For the sake of the land dwellers, She went through so many trials and errors to somehow impede the sea terror's rapid evolution, to revive the Iberian soil contaminated by the Neversea brand. But her work barely bore fruit. She let the days float by as she watched the Inquisition arrest the Aegir one by one. When her sea terror samples and research notes came into view, they all looked completely different from one another, some of them with fundamentally different physiologies. Even still, nothing stops them from being us instead of I. For the first time, she became doubtful of her efforts to interrupt their evolution. Don Quixote understood that not everything about her stories was lies, likely referring to the persecution of Aegir, them being blamed for what there wasn't a clear cause for. Irene doesn't care. She's a bishop of the Church of the Deep. This makes her a sinner in the eyes of the Inquisition, regardless of her reasons. Seriously, don't you think that it's the persecution that drove her to that? Then Mayers told them that the more she studied them, the more she found them to be such compassionate, altruistic creatures. They only cared about survival without any hint of selfishness. She didn't see them as evil monsters from the sea. Irene paused for a moment. Then she said that while the Seaborns might not be evil, she didn't see it as mattering what they are, or if they're kind, or even a different form of civilization. Iberia and her Inquisition doesn't define Seaborns as evil. They are simply the enemy, threats to human existence. She has one thing to say as an Inquisitor. All of them are her enemy. Mayers then asked if it's a good thing for the Inquisition if she was to leave for the city. Irene didn't see it as a good thing to throw their problems into another world. She saw this as abandoning her pride, unless the people of the city give her permission. As an Inquisitor, she can't let her do that. Yeah, she might be a xenophobic religious zealot, but even they have standards. Ishmael told her to not get her hopes up about that. She might wrap it up in a box that says compassion for all she wanted, but her course wasn't exactly the direction that she'd want to sail in. The damned dozen prepared for battle, and Mayers was genuinely disappointed. She didn't want to have to do this. So she summoned waves of sea terrors. The Doctor saw this as the only way this could have ended. Her words were composed entirely of her own colour and no one else's. They then directed their attention to Dante. Faust telling them to speak, she can translate. The Doctor told Dante that Rhodes Island will hold the line and defend that place against the sea terrors rushing in from the rear. He asked if Limbus Company can take down Mayers and deal with the sea terrors that remain. Dante could. Faust translated this for them. The Doctor called all operators to say that they'll be drawing the sea terrors to them. The strategy isn't to take them down, but to prevent them from getting to Limbus Company. He wanted Irene's help with this. As for Amia, they wanted her to assist Limbus Company. She agreed to do this. Mission begins. The Aegir nation is a technocratic state ruled over by scientists and engineers. They use songs as communication, being adept singers. Ooh, if they have karaoke there, that'd be a national sport. They're matriarchal and isolationist. Having fought threats from the sea, such as the Seaborn, they live in vast underwater cities. So like the city of Atlantis? Depending on which version you're thinking of. Their technology is not Originian-based. but it's far more advanced than the surface world. They have a low opinion of the land dwellers who wouldn't accept their technology and culture, although they did have good relations with Iberia in the past and helped build their navy, lighthouses, and mobile cities. The battle against the Seaborns led to some of them settling in Iberia and other locations. They sent all of their abyssal hunters to destroy the Seaborn's god, which was one that evolved to obtain that, immense power. Only a few of these abyssal hunters remained. The abyssal hunters were created by the Aegir as a countermeasure against the Seaborn. Aegir-Seaborn hybrids, which granted them enhanced strength, endurance, and speed. They favored melee weapons. They needed to keep themselves in check, or they might become what they despise. White hair and red eyes are a side effect of this. The Aegir themselves have characteristics of aquatic animals. They have problems on land, such as dry skin, which can lead to allergic reactions, chafing, and seizures. Although they're unable to breathe underwater, ironically, unless they're abyssal hunters, they're not immune to seaborne corruption. Well, Fabius was proof of that. Iberia being the only country that actively persecutes them. Others are far less hostile. As for Skadi, in Norse mythology she was a frost giant, or Jotun, and a Norse goddess associated with archery, skiing, winter, and mountains, and even had children with Odin. The Nethersea brand, that's what happens when the surface is inhabited by symbiotic organisms to the seaborn, which, if left unchecked, can cover entire towns. Little Handy's mini decontamination kit can deal with this. Either that or the Hand of the Saint. Yes, that cleaning droid, or robot, or whatever you want to call it. Yes, staying exposed to it too long can inflict nervous impairment on those standing there. Yeah, Iberia persecutes the Aegir, yet they have no problem with using devices based on their tech. The irony and the hypocrisy is clearly lost on them, isn't it? In the dungeon of the Fathoms, Dante and the Damned Dozen, assisted by their allies, fought the sea terrors that weren't distracted by Rhodes Island, where the battles would get progressively harder due to increased numbers between them and Mayas. Along the way, they encountered one of two events, depending on the path. They dealt with something that was based on the world that they found themselves in. With one event, it involved the Iberians and an Aegirian. A commotion was found at the village square. Villagers were surrounding someone with a clear intent to threaten. The evil sorcerer's gone, so why won't this calamity end? Explain!
Be honest! You just couldn't stand there to watch Iberia thrive, could you? If it weren't for the calamity, we would have...
Look, please, I'm just here to share some research notes.
What? How to fight those sea monsters? Oh, now you're looking to help us. Newsflash, it's too damn late. These scraps of paper won't do anything to help us.
The locals firmly believed that the calamity was brought there by the Aegir. If they decided to turn away from that scene, It was considered a crime to exist as an Aegir. They're outsiders. It wasn't their place to step in when they don't have enough knowledge about what's been happening. But their hesitation was an answer in and of itself. The one-sided violence struck the Aegir. They ran in to help, but the Aegir's heart was already trampled and discarded. It was not something that can be picked back up like the scattered research notes on the ground. The lone Aegir's eyes gazed despondently at nothing until they eventually left. Nothing else happened after that. If Dante decided that they had to put a stop to this, they could feel the mob turning towards them.
An evil sorcerer started the profound silence.
He pretended to work for us, but it turned out he was driven by envy for Iberia's prosperity.
Don't try to stop us, outsiders. They came from the sea, just like the sorcerer himself.
As they were protesting, the hungry, harrowed look of villagers came into their gaze. A villager cradling an empty bundle of cloth, a child holding a staff and a hat that was far too large for him. They've all lost a lot. And that void in your heart blinds you. It makes it unbearable to keep your emotions in check. Dante understood that this is how they dealt with sorrow. There were no emotions or intent to be found in the great calamity that devoured Iberia whole, so they sharpened their sorrows into wayward wraths against those who came from the sea, just like the calamity itself. Then Irene said that it meant that someone needs to direct their anger against the rightful foes, ordering that citizen to step back. Even if they were to determine that the Aegir had committed crimes, it falls under the Inquisition's jurisdiction. Yes, the Inquisition... English failing me. The Inquisition's jurisdiction to carry out the consequences. If the Aegir is innocent, do understand that your actions cannot be permitted. Yes, Irene managed to provoke some thought in the mob as they slowly walked away from the Aegir, until they scattered away. The Aegir said, "Thank you. As you can see, I hail from Aegir. Ever since the profound silence, I devoted myself to studying seaborns and never see Bran to help the land dwellers. I don't know where my colleagues have all gone, but... oh, what's the point of this anymore? They don't want my help, so why should I give it to them?" He seems crestfallen by his experience in Iberia. Two choices are ahead of them. If they chose, they might not, but there has to be someone who needs your help. A check happened, and if it passed, the Aegir said, "Maybe so. Maybe it was just a matter of what they actually want. I should approach this more carefully and possibly find a different research angle. Maybe it should be about trying to find a way to restore the soil from all the salt that destroyed it. Oh, and if you're heading out to sea, would you take this with you? These are years' worth of sea terror research notes. Take them. Maybe you'll find more use for them than I or the land dwellers did." After handing over his research notes, the Aegir walked away with an unburdened expression. The Sea Terror Notes Aegir gift was gained then. That deals 10% more damage against enemies. 1% more damage for each enemy defeated or every part that's broken, up to 20%. It can work even if the parts are broken repeatedly, especially if they're sea terrors. If the check failed, the Aegir said, "Maybe so, but the threat of the sea won't disappear just because you looked away from it. You shouldn't ignore it, even when it's not here right now." The Aegir tightly clutched the research notes and walked away determined. This heals all allies for 30 SP. If Dante chose the option that resulted in them telling the Aegir that they should return to Aegir, they said the situation back home, Aegir is not great either. We've been able to hold them back for now, but we're almost at our limits. If we and the land dwellers can help each other, maybe, well, that doesn't seem much like a possibility anymore. He looked down at his research notes with a look of despair. Guess I'll try to find a way back to Aegir. It's precarious, but that place is still my home. The Aegir slowly stumbled away after picking up the research notes. Nothing happened after that. The other event is the glorious past of Iberia, where they come across a cavern full of sunken ship remnants and golden treasures that have washed up inside. There are all kinds of unfamiliar sculptures and twinkling golden coins. There's a whole pile of treasures there. Amir said, "Hey, the records here say that this used to be a ship that sailed all across Terra." Irene said, "It must be a ship built for conquest, built during the golden age of Iberia." Amir said, "Look, it says here that this is a golden chalice made by, in Sargon. Combine an armada of tall, proud sails, unparalleled technological innovation, and a certain king's greed, and you get this. It's the kind of glory that we can barely hope to retrieve now. These items would be extremely valuable outside, but none of them seem very helpful for the situation at hand." She asked if they should continue to look just in case. If Dante decided that's enough looking around, let's move on. They decided to do so and nothing happened. If the decision to keep looking was made, a check happened, and if it passed, the Chosen would pick out a golden compass from inside a weathered bag. The inscription on the compass indicated that it was an artifact created during the era of grand expeditions. Irene asked, "How is this artifact still so intact?" Faust said, "This place is only a bridge, made of items pulled from the group unconscious, that are most appropriate for the Fathoms. It may truly exist, but it may not be reality." Irene stared at the compass for a moment, tempted, before turning around, having accepted the fact that it probably wasn't a real artifact. The gold-forged compass Aegir gift was gained. When a plus coin happened, 5 SP was healed. A minus coin will cause a loss of 5 SP. But SP can't drop below 40 SP. Although this is once per turn. And per identity. If the SP of each identity is at maximum SP or minus 30 SP or less, they gain 1 power up and 2 protection. If the check failed, the Chosen looked around for a while, but it was to no avail. Irene said, I don't think we'll find anything else in here." Amir said, "We'd best depart, then." So they decided to move on, and nothing happened. After this, and some more fighting, there are 3 different events that can happen, depending on the path chosen. The first path is a story of lighthouse keepers and a profound silence. if the lighthouse was approached, they asked the old man what he was doing there, and he turned around with a good-natured laugh. "I was once a lighthouse keeper. I used to bring the Eye of Iberia's light to the dark sea. So I'm looking out to the sea, watching the lighthouse beyond the cresting waves." Dante looked to where the old man pointed, but didn't see any lighthouses there. Yes, no lighthouses were visible. Just tall, cresting waves mercilessly pummeling the cliffs. I miss those days dearly. Days of brilliance, when I would illuminate the vast ocean. Once the profound silence came and went, Iberia became too quiet, too dark. The old man's fingers gently caressed the keys in his hand, eyes full of longing. If they told the old man to step away from the cliff, seeing it as too dangerous, he laughed, telling them not to worry. The lighthouse was taller than even that very cliffside they're on. That height was nothing to the keeper. The day was getting late. Understanding that he should head back soon, bidding them safe journeys. As they were descending the cliffs after bidding the old man farewell and return, Dante heard the splash of waves coming from behind them. The old man was nowhere to be seen on the cliff. So the old man jumped off the cliff. At least that's the implication. Nothing else happened after that. However, if asked if the key belonged to the lighthouse and the check passed, the lighthouse keeper said, "This is the last evidence in this world that the light ever existed out there at sea. A lighthouse keeper always had to carry the 3 keys on them. One to open doors, one to send messages, and one to light the sea. I don't suppose he'll do any of that now. Take it. I don't know where you're going, but one of these keys may come in handy." They tried to refuse, but the old man was insistent as he placed the key in Dante's hand. Remember there was once a lighthouse here, that the sea wasn't always dark. And as they were descending the cliffs after bidding the old man farewell, they heard the splash of waves coming from behind them. The old man was nowhere to be seen on the cliff. And the Ego gift of the silver key bundle was gained, where in boss fights, which will only work until the end of this, 1 Ego resource for each of the 3 least owned affinities at the start of each turn will be gained. And if an Ego is used, 3 Ego resources for the least owned affinity would be gained as well. However, if they just decide to leave and not approach in the first place, they would walk away, leaving the old man there, and when Dante turned around and then looked back, the old man would be nowhere to be seen on the cliff, and nothing would happen. Yeah, whichever option is chosen, the old man will jump off the cliff. Yeah. Quite grim even for this setting. The second path was where the Church of the Deep was giving out food made of sea terrors under the guise of relief to turn... Well, it was for the purpose of turning Iberians into sea terrors. They could see a long line of people waiting outside a rundown building. Inside, people in hoods were distributing something to the visitors, thanking the ocean's blessings. One of the hooded people only wished to help sate their hunger even a little. Then noticed Dante and the Damned Dozen, saying they haven't seen them there, or rather around there, seeing that they've travelled far to get there, welcoming them. Apologising to everyone there, understanding that they're new there. They were then dragged inside, saying that it's not much, but that should hopefully be able to sate their hunger. Yes, dried fish. Amia and Irene called them fin beasts. If the option was to let the other people have it first, there would be people staring hungrily at their food, so they quickly handed it over. They began to shovel it in, as though they've missed more than a few meals until they slowed down. They were going to make themselves sick without any reason to stay. They left the building, and Dante felt a little prick on the back of their head, as though the hooded people were staring at them as they walked away, but they managed to quicken their pace and disappear. Then nothing happened. If chosen to slip them in their bags and pretend they ate them, one of the hooded said that they're so glad they enjoyed their food, but did they actually eat it, or... Then there was a check. The chosen replied calmly. While the flavour was certainly unique, they did like it. At that, they seemed to withdraw their suspicion and turn away, saying, "Glad to hear it. Please, come back any time and we'll share some more." Without any reason to stay, they left the building. They felt a little prick on the back of their head, as though the hooded people were staring at them as they walked away, but they managed to quicken their pace and disappear, gaining the Sea Terror Jerky Ego gift, which inflicts 3 defense level down on all enemies or parts. If they're Sea Terrors, it's 7 defense level down. If the check failed, they said, "We're so glad you enjoyed the food, but did you actually eat it all?" The chosen replied almost instantly. While the flavour was certainly unique, they did like it. At that, they seemed to withdraw their suspicion and turn away, and said, "You didn't quite enjoy the food, did you? Hiding it away instead of eating." Everyone turned around and looked at them, and they started... or rather, any chats they had with each other came to a stop. They momentarily froze up, but the moment the hooded people began to run after them, they quickly got up and got away. The Sea Terror Jerky was still gained, but all identities would take 10 SP damage. Or rather, all of the damned dozen would take it. The third path led to an Inquisitor locked in a fight against Sea Terrors. Through the ocean wind blowing between white buildings, someone stood with a lamplight and looked around, the bloom illuminating the piles of sea monster corpses. Given the clear similarities, the similarities between his and Irene's outfit, he must be an Inquisitor too. He asked, "What are the civilians doing out here, on the front lines?" If the option to say that an Inquisitor was leading their excavation, if the check passed, he noticed Irene and said, "Aha, the Inquisitor must have been leading you out of here." Irene said, "You seem quite new, Inquisitor. Do keep up the good work." He then said, "But before you go, would you please take this lamp to the Inquisition? Please tell them that there was an Inquisitor who walked through the mists, its trials, and eventually made his country his fate." The lamp was bright and warm. This must be what the Inquisitors of Iberia were fighting the ocean to keep lit. They took the small but weighty lamp and continued. This was the brilliant lamplight Ego gift, which applied to the first in the deployment order, where every turn the first attack used gained 3 more final power, or 4 more if an EGO was used, which also dealt 25% more damage. And if they had nervous impairment, up to 4 of it was consumed. But with it being replaced by however many of this was consumed, multiplied by 2 in burn. If the check failed, he said, "I haven't seen her before. No idea where you found yourself in Inquisitor's garb, but please do evacuate quickly from here." Saying the role of a civilian is to survive and to contribute rather to Iberia's survival. Amir said, "You needn't sacrifice yourselves on the front lines to hold the line against the very sea, for that is the Inquisitor's role." With that, the Inquisitor quickly saw them away from there, and nothing happened. The option to say, "We're here to help the Inquisitors," was spoken. He said, "I appreciate the sentiment, but the role of a civilian is to survive and continue to Iberia's revival. You needn't sacrifice yourselves on the front lines to hold the line against the very sea, for that is the Inquisitor's role." With that, the Inquisitor saw them away from there quickly. And again, nothing happened. When they eventually caught up to Maya's, they could sense her despair, based on the repulsiveness of people's ill intent and the faint hope from the light found within. All kinds of emotions and memories rose to the surface of Amir's fathoms, then sank again. Those same thoughts seeped into Dante as well, unfiltered. The sins that people have committed won't just go away. Humanity's ill intent will propagate, unimpeded too. Unimpeded, rather. But the tides that Miss Mears was trying to summon to douse it will devour humanity, their civilization, and the city they came from. So, she didn't think it was the right way to go. Not as long as Dante and the people of Limbus Company refused. These words resonated, but this wasn't like the time Dante retrieved the DEGO. In place of the light, a speck of darkness cast a shadow. Then the darkness was reached out to. A strange power coursed through Dante before radiating towards the others, and emotional connection was gained. This granted an EGO resource of the attack's sin affinity, and 2 least-owned EGO resources, gained upon defeating an enemy, although 1 of each EGO resource would be consumed. 2 of each if overclocked, if the EGO extracted from Amir was used. Mayers is weak to sloth, gluttony, gloom, and pride, but not strong to anything in particular. This has something to do with her taking 90% less damage from status ailments and gains 10 protection. She uses abyssal vitality to summon sea terrors, the amount varying on how strong they are. She also takes fixed damage based on the maximum HP of the sea terror defeated. She starts with an attack that does no damage but gives 100 abyssal vitality. Any attack she makes on those fighting her will inflict sinking and nervous impairment, gaining clash power depending on the sinking of the target. When targeting allies, this gives defense level up and deals with some healing of HP. Prioritizing allies with the least HP. If it's the multi-target variant, however, the single-target variant applies offense level up. The Clashable Guard consumes abyssal vitality for each surviving ally, and applies damage to, damage up, rather, for all allies. But if the clash loses, the damage up isn't applied. If she has less than 30 abyssal vitality, she'll use an attack that will be stronger, depending on the nervous impairment on the target. If the clash is lost, she gains power down and paralyze, deals 80% less damage, nervous impairment inflicted will be halved, and sinking won't be triggered. She also has half of the abyssal vitality gained that she otherwise would have gained. This attack will also make the Basin Sea Reaper combat ready. Otherwise, while not attacked directly by the others, will remain on standby. She will also generate the Neversea brand, where her attack will also heal 10% maximum HP when she's at 50% HP. That is when Phase 1 ends. Mares is a strong opponent. She did not go down easily. Phase 2 will be in the next part. Until next time, hail the rabbit!